It is now actually 7:01, a little bit late. Time to call the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 5th to order. Would staff please note the presence of a quorum?
Ms. Berkman?
Here.
Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horkay?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz? Ms. Spoljarek?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Dave Schmitz had responded that he was on vacation and unlikely to be here. I guess that is true. Item first is the approval of minutes of our June 21, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the June 21st, 2022 APC meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion from Matt Deck, a second from Andre Maui. Would staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Ms. Spoljarek?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. First item after that is the approval of amended rules of procedure. This is a pretty comprehensive update of our rules, which we need to discuss and consider approving or forward it to a future meeting if need be. And I understand there are some commissioners that have some concerns with the level of the changes and the time needed to fully review them. So is there a staff presentation on them first?
Yeah, I can make a brief presentation. So the Rules of Procedure amendment really, the purpose of doing this amendment was to incorporate the rules created from the recent UDO amendment in relation to creation of a plat committee, so including their membership and meeting schedule, separating out the first and second plan commission meetings, designating the first for public hearings and items of business and the second for workshop meetings, with consent agenda items approved at both meetings. And then additionally, we did have a couple of other changes, one being the formalization of the adopted best practice we've been using of prohibiting ex parte communications with petitioners and between APC and/or plat committee members, and also removing our 6-month continuance rule and replacing it with a 12-month administrative dismissal as described in the staff report. These do not need to be adopted tonight. We can push them off to a new meeting. Any items that were submitted as of last Friday at our filing deadline will follow the new process as outlined in the UDO, but the soonest any of those items would be before you would be in August. So you do have a little more time before they need to be approved if you'd like to have some discussion and give some feedback for us to make changes.
Yeah, I think feedback is certainly warranted. So we can approach this either with commissioners expressing their concerns on the document, or we could go through it by section and each weigh in as we're on that section. So maybe it's going to be a little more easily discussed as we all are looking at the same thing. Opinions, anyone?
I personally haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing. We had our pre-APC, and then I've been out of town and gone since then, like I guess a couple of staff members too, for the holiday weekend. So I would just as soon have a chance to read this and then ask staff some questions at a later time. I'm not necessarily opposed to some of the changes. I just have questions about how they'll be, enacted. And I don't even want to go into them tonight because I don't want to waste anybody's time, but I can call Pam and Kevin and ask some questions about what does this mean. One of the things that I did have some concern about was the changing from 6 months to a year. At the 6-month point, which is in our current set of bylaws, it doesn't mean that the petitioner couldn't come in and say, I need to extend again and again and again. But giving them a year before they have to come in and even ask us for an extension, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, and maybe we can talk about that, but and it's not that I'm trying to get people off the agenda, but, you know, we can't just keep carrying lots of things. It slows the whole process down. That's my personal feeling, so. Those are just a couple things.
That's understandable, and just for some background, the reasoning for changing that from 6 months to a year, the 6-month has currently been from the public hearing. It doesn't really address how you handle items that are never noticed for a public hearing. We've had that happen with an item before where they submitted, they had a council introduction, they never noticed the public hearing, so at that point, when does the 6 months start? It could start 6 months after the council introduction, and there's no mechanism for removing that item from the agenda. So with the 12 months, it would be 12 months after the date of filing, so it would really be more like 10 months from their first, planned scheduled public hearing.
Okay.
Given our new process, honestly, that may be too long, that may be not enough time, but we're happy to talk about alternatives. We talked through some internally, and I'm happy to share some of those with you as well.
Right, and I know that you have reasons for what you did, and I guess I'd like to know those and see if they're appropriate for what and you hear my reasons and we talk about it, because usually then we can come to a meeting of the minds or a melding of the minds or whatever that term is. I just don't want to see something sit there for a year and have the public have to keep coming back and checking the agenda and checking the agenda. I don't think that's fair to them, and frankly, I know at pre-APC meetings, Bob usually says, have you heard from any of these people that have been sitting out there? And so it would be nice to move things along without taking anything away from anybody. I also have a question, and again, I can do these later, Pam, but we changed the appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals to modify the wording there, and I want to make sure legally that's okay, because.
Yeah, that amendment was approved in 2020 and is just incorporated into the new language.
Right, and I wasn't sure if it was legal back then,
Yeah,
so.
okay. And I know it was also incorporated into the BZA's rules a few months ago, but we'll have Beth check on that as well.
Right, and I just want to have that chat to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. I was kind of for it, because if we followed it the way it was supposed to be written in the Indiana code, that means I have to be on the BZA, and I really don't want to do that. I think Dave does a super job, so.
And I had that same concern. I couldn't remember what we had discussed a
Yeah.
long time ago to get this incorporated. So I
Well, it was kind of we've already done it, let's codify it, and
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're okay with that. Anyway, I won't say any more, but I'll be calling once I read it and we can chat.
All right, before we go any further, does staff have any inkling about July 18th? Are we going to have enough items to warrant a second meeting in July?
Yes, we do have, I believe, 2 items as of right now that plan on going on July 18th and possibly more.
Okay. We can certainly continue with anybody that has comments, but let me preface it all by indicating we can maybe keep them more brief, but whatever it is that might be lingering, kind of the usual, let's get it to staff by the end of the week or early next week, so that we have them aware of what our concerns are, so that they can digest everything and get us something back for the July 18th meeting without having to crush too much. Kristen, do you want to jump in?
To talk about something so the public can hear it. Pam, can you tell us what the state code is in regards to the number 5 in this commission communication?
Number 5 of,
Number 5, where it says communication between commission members outside of a meeting is prohibited.
is that on the next page? Number 5 within the rules then, or in the staff report, sorry. Number 5 in the rules document or
In the rules
in the
I
document.
think she's on page 5. I've been scrolling through it, and I'm on page 5, and I happen to see it, so it's page 5
Yeah,
at the top
of the
page.
rules
It's under
document.
members,
Yeah.
section 1, commission membership.
I know that the statute does not prohibit ex parte communications with Plan Commission as it does for BZA.
Is there a reason it's in here as it's prohibited?
This is a change that we've considered making since we've included it as a best practice about 3 or 4 years ago, after some issues with some PUDs that were going through where communications were happening and petitioners were being requested to change items. They then changed them. the department didn't get the chance to comment, and those changes were not appropriate for zoning ordinances.
And, you know, and I speak, it's a little tricky too, being a counselor and a plan
Yes.
commissioner. I couldn't accept that I'm not allowed to talk to a commission member outside of the meeting. I also represent them.
Yeah.
So that would not be acceptable to me. There are engaged citizens that I do talk to. I realize that ex parte communications can add a certain level of problems, but they can also help tremendously. We all have different interests, knowledge bases and things, and I know that we're needing to go through staff to address all these things, but oftentimes it's just we need to have a conversation with somebody. You know, I might talk to Jenny to find out more about horses, you know, and I'm not going to be able to do that through a staff member like I would somebody who has horses.
Yeah.
And so there's things like that that are tricky to me to then say it's prohibited. I just have a problem with that.
And I tend to agree. I think that if we've had problems in the past, and I know of a couple of things where I think the better way to do it is to simply sit with the Plan Commission, maybe at one of our discussion groups, and talk about things like that so that they know where they are causing you problems. I know when I was on the APC 15 or 20 years ago, whatever it was, we didn't even talk about this. We just, if people wanted to talk to people, we did. It was, and I think the idea of not having, you know, meetings with people is good, but I think to ask a question now and again or to clarify something and feel like I'm going to get arrested or thrown off the commission if I do that is almost going too far, and I don't know that you would do that, but administrations change, and I don't want to hamstring us from, as Cindy said, simple things. I know way back in the beginning, Kristen would call me occasionally and say, I'm looking at this agenda, I don't understand this, and I'd give her a reference to where in our bylaws or in the PUD or our UDO it would be. You know, we didn't talk about voting or whether we were for it or against, but it was easier for her to get me quickly when she was doing something and ask a question than it was to try to get to staff, which almost, you know, you guys are so busy, it may take a day or two. So simple things like that, I don't want to shut that down.
Okay.
So I think a big no-no, you shouldn't do it, is, for me at least, as effective as any ordinance, because I tend to be one who follows the rules.
Yeah, we can discuss better ways to word the language. I know some concerns that our legal team has, if people are meeting with petitioners, it could constitute a serial meeting. If a petitioner meets with each and every one of you about the same thing, then that meeting that discussion should have occurred in public with all
I
of you,
agree.
not with each of you individually. And the same between members. If one of you is calling or emailing every other member asking the same question, then that question should have been asked in a
Right.
public forum.
I agree, and maybe just more of an education on where the line is would be more helpful but that's for everybody to.
Yeah, and we
think
could
about.
also clarify the topic. I think with the BZA rules, it may specifically say that you can't be contacted in order to influence your vote on a petition or regarding a petition, so that way general questions such as Cindy calling you, asking a question about horses, I mean, that's not necessarily related to the
Right.
vote, that's a question. If it's a procedural
Right, it's an
question.
educational question,
yeah.
right,
It's a difficult thing to try to figure out how to write it into a rule.
Yeah.
I
Right.
understand the problem. The Purdue course that we all should have taken gave us some guidance on that, the
It
Planning
says
Indiana.
discouraged.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
I believe it says discouraged.
yeah,
And the
And-
horse.
And I believe that's APA Indiana's stance as well, is that it's very much discouraged.
right,
And I
right,
think Plan 1 should always be tri-staff
right.
before you resort
Right, I
to
agree.
going member to member. Give staff a good opportunity, both in a voicemail if need be, because you don't get an answer, and then a text or an email to pursue staff first. I think going to a developer is an entirely different thing that has gotten
Right.
us into a real quagmire on previous occasions, so we definitely need to hold that as a much more firm application of what's intended here. Member to members may be a little different. So if anybody has things they want to comment further, we can discuss
Right,
that, but I think we've raised the issue and staff understands what we
Right.
need to look at.
And it also doesn't say on an active petition, so maybe,
Yeah.
you know, that could be inserted if we talk about that. If somebody is getting ready to file and they call one of us and say, I'm doing this next door to you, I want to talk about it before I file, you know, that's probably okay. I don't know. I mean, I think we just need to flesh out where you want the lines drawn.
Yeah, I do think fleshing out is really important. You said the right thing there, Jenny, because the proposed language, I hear and understand the concerns that it's a little bit absolute and harsh, but there's a simplicity to it that I really appreciate. As Kristen mentioned, the Purdue course said this was discouraged, and we've had best practices, and that's ambiguous enough that how we each interpret and how we've acted upon that's varied. And it would be really good to get us all on equal footing and follow something. So if we can make adjustments to accommodate these concerns, but still have it very clear cut, that's what I'd be looking for.
Well, I think another issue is, you know, when you have wording like this, that we can't talk outside of this meeting, Bob is serving on the Streetscape Committee. So I no longer get to talk to Bob. I don't know what
Me
I'm going to do. Sign language, and then I can't talk to Cindy, or I can't talk to Mike, because they're both on that Streetscape Committee as well. And then when you go down and talking about property owners and developers, we have Dan Moyer and Justin Moffett on that committee. So pretty quickly, I'm not able to email half of the team and speak with half of the team based on this particular point. So I'm very concerned
Yeah, and I
on
can say
this
that,
wording.
that
on this
definitely
wording.
was not the intent for it to be out in public outside of your role as a plan commissioner.
But I
you
am
can't
a
talk
plan
about that.
commissioner in that role.
Yeah.
So, and they have open petitions in the downtown. I mean, we still haven't finalized Union Square. So it is,
But in the streetscape
confusing.
committee meetings, we're not trying to hammer out details of Union Square. That's material for council in this body more so than at the streetscape committees. And while we do have them as a resource for developer input, which is helpful to have, maybe I
We're
missed
right
a
on the sidewalk.
conversation. Excuse
we're
me?
right on the sidewalk in front of that building, and they want feedback based on that. I just, you know,
But we're
it's like we
talking about
get
the
really
sidewalk more so than their development.
gray, and I just want some different wording on this one before I would feel comfortable, because I don't want to break the rules.
Yeah.
So,
And that sounds, I mean, Pam's indicating what the intent is, and I think this sounds like something that can be resolved with some clarifying language to make it focus purely on the matters it was intended to and not stretch beyond that.
Correct.
Yeah.
I had
'Cause it-
another, oh, sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
have more
No,
on
no,
that one.
go ahead.
I had another item on the proposed change I want to bring up, on the workshop meetings. And I don't know if this is going to turn into a question or just a comment, suggestion, whatever, but workshop meetings, you know, we haven't had them yet, so I don't know exactly how they're going to go. But typically, and this isn't a design workshop per se, like the petitioner with their consulting firm, but nevertheless, it's probably going to run more in that tone, that style, that discussion amongst us. It's different than running a business meeting, and it may be helpful for some of these to have a facilitator who's not a commission officer, because otherwise, when you end up with that duality of being, like if Bob's trying to preside over a workshop, he may not really participate the same way, and I don't know if you feel that way or not, but I have in business dealings, a workshop has a whole different tone. It's almost like keeping the commission officer's role the same for running those meetings makes sense, but then within a specific workshop, we might want to consider language to have a third-party facilitator for the ones that we choose to. Maybe not always, but somebody that's objective.
Like you having not had one yet, I'm not sure how exactly they will play out in Westfield, Indiana. I didn't anticipate having a facilitator would necessarily be of critical nature, but I can see your point.
Andre, I can tell you when we used to have workshops, because we used to have the system where we had one working meeting a month only, then we had one working meeting a month and one workshop. We met in the conference room at City Hall, when you walk in the door, the one on the left, and we just all sat around the table, and the petitioner sat around the table, and it really wasn't a real formal thing. It was just kind of like everybody talked and asked questions. So I'm not sure how this one will function, but it was a pretty loose, just everybody sit there and ask questions and There wasn't anybody that really presided so much.
And I believe that's, my understanding was the expectation is what you describe, and that that's also something that should help in the peer-to-peer communication, that we bring those kinds of things perhaps to the workshop meeting where we can just pick everybody's brain in the presence of the petitioner, who can also weigh in with, how would you possibly ever think that's correct? Let me help you out here. And then we start this dialogue going.
And I know, for example, I occasionally write comments on a petition and send it to Pam or whoever's appropriate. And I'm sure you never get those, and I never get yours. And I feel bad about that, because I would like to hear, like, what you have to say if you had comments, because you have a whole different scope of knowledge than I do. So hopefully the workshops will allow us to do that. But I don't know if that's something that, if we send you something, can you distribute it to the rest of the APC? I know that Beth, doesn't want us responding back and forth, but I certainly would learn from other commissioners' comments.
We can look into that. If nothing else, I would imagine we could post them to the agenda similar to our public comment exhibit and have a plan commission comments exhibit, if
Yeah,
nothing
that
else.
that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts to folks on my left who have been, other than Cindy?
Well, we were
quiet
just talking about, I think that would make it actually much more efficient if we all actually were able to know the written comments that were submitted, or anything that was sent to staff, if that wasn't a record that we could all then be privy to. That way we're not all coming in without having a clue of what anyone else thought about it too. And again, I don't know if that's possible for us to do legally. I know I've, over the years put in many, many comments on a lot of things, and I know none of them, well, not none, but very few of them actually got to the rest of the Plan Commission over the years. And so, not that I have answers or that anything I say is more important than anyone else, but it's just I put stuff out there, and I don't think anyone ever sees it. So I don't know if anyone feels the same way I do on a project, sees the same problem I do, or a similar solution, maybe, so.
And hopefully the workshop will get a lot of those comments out, so that we won't have to do that. One other thing, since we're revising these under continuing education, it's on page 6, number 3. It says, each member shall be a member of the American Planning Association and the Indiana chapter through the department. When I was on the APC before, we all had that, and I got a monthly or a quarterly bulletin. And when I asked about that about 6 or 8 months ago or so, I was like, oh, we don't do that. So either we take it out or we do it.
Yeah, we are going to start doing that again.
Okay.
The membership
was
price is
helpful.
actually pretty low for commissioners compared to staff
Right,
members,
right.
so we are able to do that.
Okay, good, because that was helpful.
Whoever it was that published the document, the newsletter, those things were incredible. I've still got a huge stack somewhere in my office at home. I'd love to get those, and I don't know if, I think that particular thing went out of existence. But
Yeah,
there
they're
is somebody that
digital
has
now,
this-
but they do send a lot of information, so we
Yeah,
will.
if there's
we'll
somebody
make
that has
sure to get
something
that out.
similar, I'd love to start reading some of like that again, because those things, I looked forward to getting those at whatever meeting they were passed out to us, because they were terrific help. Go ahead, Kristen.
Pam, I'm wondering on page 12, section 3, the public notice by first-class mail. I know that's probably not something that you've changed, but I'm just, would like to bring up maybe a topic on that. Sometimes when you're in an area with a lot of AGSF1 neighbors, this is maybe only one person gets notified next to something, although lots of people in the area are going to be impacted. Is there any way, and we had an example on the petition that was on 159th Street, and I think it's 6 months or a year ago, and a lot of those neighbors just didn't know. And the reason was the public hearing sign, which can happen, was laying in the middle of the road face down. Like it had been blown into the middle of the road. And so the two adjoiners, I think, got notified, but others didn't. And so is there any way, I know why you have it written the way you do, in case there's probably multifamily or a high-density single family. You don't want to send a letter to 500 people, and I understand that. But is there any way that we could think about the wording on this to maybe be able to spread the scope a little bit in that situation?
I can talk to legal about that. I know the rule we use is very standard. The state does not actually require mailing public notice unless you're on a county line. And in the case that you're on a county line, what we have is the rule. And I believe that's what all the other local municipalities use, but I can look into that more. But I'm definitely happy to bring it up with legal to see what options we have for changing that.
Okay,
The
thank you.
standard had been a certain number of
Two property
feet,
owners
and then
deep
two
or an eighth
properties,
of a
whatever.
mile, whichever is less.
Yeah, and the old rules of procedure before, the ones approved in 2013, said 2 properties deep. It didn't do the 650, I think.
Okay.
And we changed it back then. I'm not sure I was happy about it, but we changed it because of there could be a multifamily housing developer right next to it. And then if you're going 2 properties deep and you got a zillion people, you're spending a fortune on certified mail.
Yeah.
But, so I think there's a place for that, but I also understand Kristen's concern, especially when you get out to where there are 650 feet is only like a third of my property.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't get to the next people or people around it. So there may not be an easy solution, but might be something to think about.
Yeah, we can see what options there are to make it fair and,
Maybe there's a difference in the
bigger.
density around it. I don't
Yeah.
want to make this complicated, but.
How big of a supply of the what's happening here signs do we have? Because I've always thought they were kind of small. If we have 500 of them, I don't want to just waste 500
I'm not sure.
signs.
I believe we have quite a few, but I don't know for sure. I'll
I've
have to
always thought
check.
they need to be a little bigger, or if we have a huge inventory, maybe we just put a bunch more out to make sure that if something lands in the street upside down, that there's redundancy across the
Well, and a lot of them,
front of the
you know,
property.
especially out in my area, you can't even see them because they're putting in the middle of the alfalfa field or they don't mow along the road and you can't even see them. So they're completely ineffective. That might be helpful too.
Okay.
But if you do tell staff, they'll go out and check it out, because on occasion I have brought up that there's one that didn't belong out there. Did that just recently for something behind
I don't want them to
Tom
have to
Roush
run out
on
and do it.
116, or David Brown Drive, where the petition is long since gone, but the sign was still there. So just let them know, and they'll actually go
Yeah.
out and take care of it.
Okay.
Pam, the last thing is really minor, but in these rules, it says if you are going to be absent, you need to call the director.
We can add or email, text, notify,
great.
just generally, yeah.
I don't know if
I think
Kevin
that
wants
wasn't
all these
changed from
calls.
before, and things have changed over
Yeah.
the years, so, yep, we can. add.
It's minor, but while we're doing it, thank you.
Trying to foster that human touch.
So I have to go, I can't just call you.
Do we want to make it director or president? Because I have
Yep, we
had
can do that.
folks make me aware that I'm not sure staff did know about, but if I'm not going to be around, I certainly
It's
make
easier
sure
to
that
get you
and
than
staff.
it is Kevin.
Sometimes it probably is. So if we want to make it president as well as that, that's fine. I can make sure everybody knows. So, other thoughts that anybody wants to really bring up tonight, or do we?
I have one thing and it's just because I'm trying to see if we can increase transparency in some of our processes. A lot of what I get back in feedback is people didn't know something is happening until it's already done. And I don't know exactly the way we reach everybody, but in section 2 exemptions here of the notice,
What page?
Same page still we were on,
I'm ahead of you.
12.
yeah, it's 12.
Oh, okay.
The applications to change, repeal, replace, or amend all or portions of the zoning ordinance or comp plan shall only be required to give notice at the hearing by newspaper publication as set forth herein. I don't know anybody that really reads the paper anymore locally, unfortunately, and so it doesn't seem like that makes sense. At the very least, we could be putting it on the website somehow when we have something that impacts potentially a very broad amount of people in the community. It would seem to make sense that we have a requirement to have that on the website at least.
We could look at something like that, but the exemption is really the exemption from the other notice rules in that document. So we
Yeah.
don't have to mail or put a sign up because, and we'd have to mail to the entire community or put signs up everywhere. because those items apply everywhere. So we can look at that. I don't know if that would go in our rules or if it should go somewhere else, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and either way, it'll be on the agenda when it comes up, but we can look at having something on the website.
Okay.
What newspaper do we publish in?
The Hamilton County Reporter.
The what?
The Hamilton County Reporter.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I will just jump on that, being the youngest one up here. Kind of the millennial newspaper is Facebook. So is social media kind of an option to have that as being able to post it on the city Facebook page saying, here's what's happening, and link to the city's website, or maybe running a Facebook ad, which would be equivalent of putting an ad in the newspaper. So I'm just trying to think outside the box.
We can talk that over with the Communications Department.
Okay.
All right, comments to staff in a week. We'll discuss this again July 18th, I think is where we're standing as of now. We may or may not make a decision that evening. We have a little bit of time, as Pam has indicated. So we'll move on to actually what's kind of the beginning of most meetings, review of APC rules and procedures, and we do have an item of business and public hearings tonight.
Yes, for our public hearings this evening, the meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing. Individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. Those representing a group will be given 5 minutes to speak. Only one member of each group will be given 5 minutes to speak, and for efficiency purposes, we ask that those representing a group please come up to speak first. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard and all emails received during the meeting have been provided to Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For our non-public hearing items, the meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the Plan Commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission will then act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time, and again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, then please form a line along the west wall when the public hearing is open and sign on the sign-in sheet as you approach the podium to speak. Again, we ask those representing a group come up to speak first. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we ask that you not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there's approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and wish to comment on a petition, then you can email your public comment to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded on to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We would like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be put onto the record. Also, please mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you come up to the podium to speak, please ensure that the microphone is on as indicated by the green light on the base. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a consent agenda item this evening. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Victor McCarty and a second by Kristen Berkman. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have a item of business, 2206-PUD-12, Andover PUD amendment, Parcel I for a daycare. Do the staff report first.
Yes, good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department.
The item being presented before you tonight is an amendment to the Andover PUD. The proposed PUD amendment is associated with a 2-acre parcel located on Grassy Branch Road, just north of Washington Woods Elementary School. The petitioner is proposing a daycare facility which is currently permitted. However, the petitioner is requesting a PUD text amendment for the following items: increasing the maximum allowable size of the daycare facility from 8,000 square feet to 11,000 square feet, decreasing the front yard parking area setback from 30 feet to 10 feet, utilizing fiber cement siding as a permitted primary building material in lieu of EFS. This item was introduced at the May 9th council meeting. The petitioner held a neighborhood meeting on May 17th, and a public hearing was held for this item at the June 6th Advisory Plan Commission meeting. Since the public hearing, the following additions have occurred. The front yard landscape buffer was noted to be 10 feet in width in order to be consistent with the front yard parking area setback request of 10 feet as well. Lastly, the petitioner has agreed to attach the landscape plan as an exhibit to the PUD amendment and require substantial compliance with that landscape plan at time of development. The petitioner is online virtually and does not plan to make a presentation. However, the petitioner is available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. In the absence of a petitioner presentation, we'll open up the floor for commission comments. Are there any?
Couple of questions. I know that the public comment talked about wanting fencing around the entire parcel to be, I think, chain link or whatever they were proposing. So I'm assuming that the fencing around the entire property is what type?
I believe it is an aluminum picket. That's my
It's-
understanding.
It's what?
Picket fence.
A picket fence?
That's my
Okay.
understanding.
It's,
Is the petitioner on?
Is the petitioner, are you online
yeah,
with this?
it's
Okay.
an
You-
aluminum, a black aluminum that mirrors their black aluminum fencing that's required.
Okay,
So it'll look the exact same.
okay, thank you. And kudos for the hardy plank or cement fiber board, whatever we're calling it now, over EFS. Certainly a more durable product. I think that was it.
Okay, thank you. Other commission comments? Andre?
No, I didn't have any. I
Oh.
just think it's such a minor change and an improvement, like you said, the materiality and things like that, so it fits in the residential style and everything, so,
Definitely a step in the right direction.
no.
Comments down to my left?
Well, because they're tying the landscape plan to this, it's just a concern I've had with other projects as well, is the Colorado blue spruces. And, you know, as I've been told by the state arborist, we're gonna lose all of them. So it seems like a terrible idea to plant them, and because they're included in this plan specifically, I just didn't know how staff interprets that if they were to make a change.
Generally, we'll allow a change for a like species. If you'd prefer that to be in the ordinance, we can definitely add that. But typically, if we have an approved landscape plan and somebody can't get a Colorado spruce and get something else instead, we've allowed that as long as it's another evergreen. Same with shade and ornamental.
The Norway spruce would be a good substitute. You don't want to do white pine. I don't think we've ever really allowed that. And Cindy is right. Because of the higher humidity and higher temperatures, the state says we're going to lose all of our spruces, our Colorado green and blue spruces. So it would not be a good idea to plant them, just for the petitioners, FYI.
Yeah, thank you for that comment.
Noted.
Do we need to make an official change to request that, or is it okay just having it in the record?
I would probably say include it in the motion, just so we can add some sort of language allowing for tree replacement. It's in our UDO, but since they're committing to a specific landscape plan, if for some reason this weren't to happen for 10 years, I wouldn't want that to be an issue.
Okay. Was there a attempt to make a comment from the petitioner online?
No, just that, hey, I'm not married to Colorado blue spruce. This is a landscape designer, and if we want to change it, it's no big deal.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you're good with what we've just discussed?
Yeah.
Okay, Weston?
And just to add to, there is a concurrently submitted a detailed development plan, so we'll be sure to add that comment as we review the landscape plan as well. We'll make that note.
Any other comments? If not, this is in front of us for a recommendation to council. That motion would need to reflect the discussion that we just had about the ability to approve an alternate tree species. Still the conifer, though.
I will make a motion to send a positive recommendation to the city council on 2206-PUD-12 with the addition of a substitution will be allowed for the Colorado spruces with another spruce of similar quality and size, if need be.
Thank you. Second for that?
Second that.
We have a motion from Dr. Kelleher, seconded from Andre Maury. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Dack?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, we have 3 public hearing items, first of which is petition 2207-ODP-07 and 2207-SPP-07 Osborne Trails Phase 3. Staff report.
Good evening, Commission members. For the record, Ryan Collingwood with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you tonight is an overall development plan and primary plat review of 107 single-family lots on about 43.5 acres located west of Horton Road and north of 193rd Street. This proposal will be a continuation of the existing Osborne Trails residential community. The subject property is located on the same real estate as the recently approved Osborne Trails PUD Amendment 5, which changed the permitted use on the property from attached dwellings to single-family dwellings. This amendment was approved by City Council back in May. This item is before you this evening for a public hearing. It has been properly noticed and advertised, and staff has received 1 public comment, which has, as of this morning, been available in a provided public comment exhibit. Keith Lash of Lennar Homes is here tonight and does not plan to make a presentation. He is available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to opening the public hearing, which will open at 7:43 p.m. Do we have any cards? While we're preparing for the speaker, a reminder to anybody that might be attending virtually, if there is a comment you would like to make, please type quickly, send an email to planners@westfield.in.gov, and indicate the petition number or just Osborne Trails Phase 3 so it'll catch staff's attention.
My name's Eugene Kaminsky. I live at 19477 Summerall Place in Osborne Trails 1. I'm the writer of the document that's included in your packet this evening. Under the first item there, it had been brought up by, I think, Ginny Kelleher during second meeting that we had regarding the development, that in the area at the north end and the middle, there's 2 areas that are open areas, and she had made a suggestion that maybe there should be some sort of seating area, gathering space, gazebo or something at the time. I did not see that in the responses by Lennar when they followed up on their 3rd meeting, which was not a public forum. So I thought I'd put that in there today. In the committees concerning use and development of the real estate document that was submitted in order to get the approval for this 107 development, we talked about a gathering space. We went from 488 homes to now 788. We went to a total of approximately 1,500 community members that would have access to the existing retreat facility. The biggest room in the retreat facility capacity under fire is 150 individuals. I made an error in my assessment here of what this 11,300 maximum capacity square footage for the entire area of Osborne Trails 1, 2, and 3 would be is that I figured out the difference was 1,300 square feet. And last night, watching the fireworks from the side of the retreat where there's a concrete slab, I walked it off and it turns out to be 1,260 square feet. And I know Lennar has plans to now put a portico over that. And that's how I feel they're kind of misrepresenting the extension of the square footage needed for Osborne Trails 2 and 3 developments. I still think that they have plenty of space, that they could extend that area so that the community could gather more than 150 people at a time in order to have adequate gathering space on the south end closest to their pond. So that 1,300 is not, I don't believe is going to go to the north end of Osborne Trails 1 where the swimming pool apparently is going to be built. But they're also going to have to put in some sort of accommodations for a bathhouse, I assume, or for bathrooms for men and women. This project has started with phase one. The retreat appeared to be adequate for the residents as we bought into that community. But as phase 2 and phase 3 have been added to the plot plan, we now are going to be close to a maximum of 1,500 people. And I really don't feel that the retreat space in its current configuration is adequate to be able to maximize the utilization for that number. When there was 488 homes, I thought it was a perfect size, a great opportunity. And I would feel that Lennar, who builds a really fine home in a great community as Westfield, would want to have the exclusive 55+ and over community in comparison to Del Webb communities. Del Webb communities of approximately 1,700 community members. Not only do they have their retreat, but they have a larger facility for gatherings, et cetera. So they've accommodated that kind of configuration. We know our homeowners association fees would go up. I wanted to show you what the current one was in terms of the 250 monthly times 12 times 787 homes, $2.361 million annually. Now that goes for a lot of things. That's snow removal and lawn cutting, irrigation, et cetera, et cetera. But still, to give you an idea in terms of size does matter. So at this point in time, as we've been piecemealing this project together, I just feel that you should take the time to request Lennar to put a complete master facility plan together for a 55+ community that's an exclusive when compared to other 55 and over communities in the surrounding areas before you finalize your approval. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Are there any other folks present that are interested in speaking? Are there any emails?
We have no emails.
No. Does not appear if there's anyone else in the room, so I will close the public hearing at 7:49 and invite the petitioner to respond to the comments that they have heard.
Good evening. Good evening. For the record, Keith Lash with Lennar. I appreciate the comments from Mr. Kaminsky, the commission and the council. As we went through this expansion of Osborne Trails, there was, as you all recall, a lot of discussion about amenities. I think I feel like we did a fine job of expanding our commitment to Osborne Trails in the PUD amendment and with the commitments that run with the real estate, expanding the clubhouse, additional sports courts, bocce ball. We had a pick list, if you will. So we're committed to doing those. We absolutely plan to do that. I can assure you there's not a bait and switch where we're going to add a pergola and claim we meet the square footage. The intent of the PUD is that the square footage is conditioned space. I think the retreat today is just over, I think it was 8,600 square feet. So our plans are to expand to the north, build a separate facility, pool house, bathhouses, another gathering space. It's in design. Currently, it's 4,800 square feet. We have a poll out to the residents seeking feedback on whether they desire an indoor pool, an outdoor pool. If an outdoor pool, one of size, it might require lifeguards. So we continue to solicit feedback from our residents. We'll take that feedback and we'll develop our final plan. It will be in accordance with the PUD and our commitments that we've made to date. But we're here tonight for primary plat development plan for these 107 lots that complies with the PUD. So we would request your approval.
Okay, thank you. This is in front of us as a public hearing item only, unless there's some change from staff. So if Mr. Kaminsky wants to take this up further, Mr. Lash is the one to speak with to get any additional clarity that you might want. The public hearing is over now, so if you need to talk to Mr. Lash, do that outside of the meeting, phone or email him. So that is all we have in front of us regarding this particular issue. Plan Commission members, no further comments, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next public hearing item, which is petition 2207-PUD-13, the Woods-Robinson-Briggs PUD Amendment 2. And Weston has a staff report.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. The item being presented before you tonight is an amendment to the Woods-Robinson-Briggs PUD. The proposed PUD amendment includes the following items: adding roughly 4.5 acres of additional real estate to the PUD, modifying the general regulations of the proposed District 1 water feature, modifying the proposed Park Trailhead District standards, and replacing the district map and concept plan with updated and revised versions. This item before you this evening is up for a public hearing. This item was introduced at the June 13th City Council meeting. It was properly noticed and advertised, and staff has received no public comments. Neighborhood meeting was held on June 28th. The petitioner is here tonight to present details of the project. They're available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. And I believe Birch Dalton is here to present details.
Thank you.
We have a laser pointer. I didn't bring mine.
Do you want to point with the mouse?
Say what? Oh, thank you. Does it work? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Birch Dalton, 191st Street land acquisition. Really, the amendment here is two simple things. We're adding the girth property right here to the existing GB and all the existing GB language. And then the seller of this ground happens to be here tonight. If you have any questions of her, Patty Girth is here. And then if you want to switch over to the park, I think what the Woods family has tried to create here is more of a conservatory and more of a nature park versus a developer park where you have a lot of playground equipment. The only comment we've had on this is TAC Fire Department wants a turnaround here for the parking lot. But what you're looking at is a bunch of native Indiana trees, shrubbery, flowers and plants, kind of like what we've done at Cool Creek, but not as organized with signs and so forth. You'll have crushed stone pathways, and this will be a limited access. When I say that, you know, mechanical, if carts were ever allowed on Mona on the Woods family, don't want them coming through the park. So we'll have billiards there. Discussion with city and city parks. We're going to add sanitary and water to the site. so we can have a restroom. So it's a true trailhead. People can park, get on the Monon. People can come off the Monon. So I think it's a big improvement. It's something the Woods family has invested a significant amount of engineering money into. And so that's, the change to section, I think it's 8.2 of the PUD. So you might go to the concept plan again. So if you recall, we had a big circle here that was our water feature. And after hiring a fountain engineer and some other engineers, a couple of things was apparent. One, we had one of our most, attractions buried at the back of the property versus up front, but also a vertical fountain with the wind that was out there at Grand Park in that area would end up blowing all the water this direction, in most cases. So what we want to do is take the same, water feature, actually make it bigger, and have right down the middle of the Grand Park Boulevard a waterfall look. If you can go to an exhibit, I'll show you a couple ideas. So what you have here, and this happens to be from a Long Island engineer. I had some other ones. I don't know if you put in there the ones I sent today. That's all right. Don't worry about it. But so we're going to have starting at the north side and working down. And this is not the final elevation, but this is the theory behind it. Have a waterfall with the LED lights, which will allow us a couple things. One, have change of color. We can make it look like a wave coming down. But the winter time was the concern I had, is then when you can't have water in it, it gets kind of, kind of duddy looking. So using the lights, some plantings and so forth will keep that feature alive during the, the cold months, and then bring it back each year. So, we're gonna really try to create, coming off, and you might show the roundabout now. We just got this in the last couple of weeks. This is the proposed design from the city on the new roundabout for Grand Park Boulevard. And you'll see that, it's pushed up onto our property. We're creating kind of a unique look, but we're gonna discuss this. I wanted a little more of a thoroughfare through here, and their designer didn't have our plans. But, this just came to us, so, it's a pretty fluid situation, but the plan is to, as we widen 191st Street, this roundabout will come in and really alleviate the traffic going left. I mean, if you're ever there on a Saturday, from here all the way back to 31, it's pretty tough. So at this point, the update on it is that we're hoping to submit road plans, late July, August, and still try to get utilities in this year. But I can assure you, you can go back to concept plan again. We will probably be back in the fall with a little more design, a little more detail here, and probably another amendment. But the church has hired their architect. We have a 3-firm group working on this now. So things are moving ahead pretty nicely. We just closed on a very large credit facility to put in the roads and the utilities, so Weekly can open up in the spring. And things are proceeding pretty well on it. Even with the few headwinds of interest rates, but the supply of our materials look like it's getting better, not worse. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
We'll move on to the public hearing first.
Okay.
So it is exactly 8 p.m. and I will open the public hearing on this particular item. Do we have any cards?
Yes, we have one individual.
Thank you. Mr. Woods?
Ladies and gentlemen of the Plan Commission, my name is Craig Wood. I live at 167 East 191st Street, and I live basically just kind of down the street from this proposed project. Most of you know that during the course of this project being presented, have raised numerous concerns, and I appreciate your time and consideration of those. Tonight, I have one additional concern. I am glad to hear that down the pike, at least beyond the concept plan, the area designated for commercial will have more definition to it. I would ask, particularly if I was sitting in your seat, but I would ask for specific definition of what will go in those commercial areas. I know there's additional real estate that's being proposed to add it on for this, and I would just be concerned that whatever is proposed is specifically defined, and that if and when the project is completed, that what we end up with is what matches that definition. Thank you.
Thank you. I did not remind everybody that might be attending virtually at the beginning of this, so we'll have to delay a moment, but if there's anybody attending virtually that has a comment, please be sure and email quickly to planners@westfield.in.gov regarding Woods, Robinson, Briggs. It's 8:02, so at 8:04, we'll close the public hearing if there's no further comment. And while we're waiting, just as an advance reminder to anybody, the same request for electronic comments applies to Midtown at Westfield PUD, which is our next item once we complete our activity on this one tonight.
Pam, while we're waiting, can I ask that you be ready to pull up the concept plan for the original PUD?
Yep.
Thank you. We can't put them side by side, can we? Not the new one, the new one and the old one? You can do that? Wow.
You ask and you shall receive.
Wow, she's
This
good.
is Westfield, Indiana. We have tech-smart people
Wow.
here.
Wow. Great, thank you.
Have we received an email?
Not on this project, no.
No. All right. Then the public hearing is closed at 8:04 PM. And if the petitioner would like to address any comments that Mr. Wood has first brought up, and then we'll open it up for commissioner comments.
Well, I think in the language of the PUD, we're not changing any definitions or anything other than some of the amenities that we're taking out of the park or putting into the park. So there's no change to what we've already approved.
I believe it's GB, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, GB1. So the girth property would fold into the GB1.
All right. If that's the only response you have to Mr. Wood, we'll go ahead and open the floor to commissioner comments. Dr. Kelleher, do you want
Might as well
to
jump
start?
in.
You just already kind of started, so.
Adding the additional land for commercial, I think is good. We need more commercial up there at Grand Park. This is prime real estate, so I'm pleased to know that. I will be looking at the GB to see what it is, if it's the same as the other one, you know, that kind of works, but I haven't looked at that in a long time. I will for Mr. Woods. My concerns are, let me start with the park. In the original park, there were to be play spaces for children, teens, and adults. And then basically, that's what you've taken out of the new definition for parks. And one of my concerns is that you have a whole lot of people up there, and there's no playground, there's no, whether it's empty nesters or seniors, they still have grandkids, there's really no place to go. So I'm a big fan of passive parks. I think we need more of them, but not to have any playground equipment or anything like that up there, I have a concern with, Birch.
Well, I think at a minimum, we'll have the fitness type or the nature type, workout type stuff. But to say there's gonna be a bunch of swings and teeter-totters, I don't think that's the Woods family's vision here. So I think
Okay.
staff can get with Joe Morris, who represents the Wood family, and discuss your concern on that.
Okay, and it's a concern for me because you have so many people packed in here. And the original concept plan had 2 ponds that split the higher density from the lower density. It gave a lot more open space. There may be a reason that that isn't in place now, but I'm just concerned that there's no place these people can go to take kids. It doesn't have to be a big park, but I think somebody should think about that because you're trying to build a community here.
Right. Well, just a point of clarification for you is what you see in the new plan is what you approved already for weekly. I just, above that, so the 2 ponds went through APC and the council just in the last few months. And
Right.
what
And
you're
staff
seeing is.
Staff
Right.
made the judgment that the new plan was compliant with the original concept plan. That wasn't a decision that we made. Staff made that decision. And that's not my issue here. My issue is that there is no place. You've got a tremendous amount of people packed in here. And 2 things. There was supposed to be a park that did have some play equipment, maybe not a lot, but something where if somebody wants to take a stroller down there or their kid wants to go do something, there's no place to do that. And number 2, and I'll go to the pond next, or the fountain. I understand wind, and I think going from a fountain or a structure, a water structure, it could be a tiered thing, just like you have presented as your alternative, but it could be a round one. You have changed the way these buildings are oriented. And I think Mr. Maui had some kind of concern with some of those parking issues on the plan, and the angled buildings give you a gathering space. That's what that fountain or whatever, water feature, whatever we want to call it, is. It was supposed to be a gathering place for a fairly intense community.
Well, that centerpiece, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it wasn't. It's just a fountain. And
But
a
it
couple
had
other things came into play.
Okay, but-
Citizens on the utilities has made it pretty cost prohibitive to take the utilities around that because we need to take it up Road Cut 2. And to take them around that, they were making it pretty ornery. And the feature was just a park and a road around it. It wasn't the escape zone. Hey, Matt, can I borrow your pointer?
Well, the pictures you showed made it look like a place for gathering, and what it's become now is a median. It's basically a median going into this area. There is no place for people to sit or gather.
Well,
And if you show the picture, Pam, of the representation that Bert showed us of the proposed, those look like they have space around them. The top one, you have green space and some benches. This is going to be on either side of 2 rows, one going in and one going out. And the other 2 pictures you have are actually fountains that would go along. The axis is different than what you're going to have here. I don't know how wide that center area is, maybe 15, 20 feet.
it's going to be closer to 30, and people will be able to sit on both sides of it. If you switch back to this
That
concept
isn't,
plan,
but you're not showing us that. You're not committing to that. I don't like to lose what was a gathering space. Not in this highly dense community that needs some place for relief. The original one showed the angled buildings. And if it costs more to go around it than straight up, I'm not sure.
Well,
It's
it's
your
easy for
problem,
you to
not mine.
say, you know, but talking $500,000, so, I mean, I'm honoring the commitment to have the water feature there, and I'm expanding it, and it makes a lot more sense to bury a fountain at the back. It just, you know, this is why there's fluid, and then, you know, that roundabout's not my design, you know. I was gracious enough to put the land in the deal for the roundabout, so they've taken probably another ½ acre of land there that's very expensive for a roundabout. And so what I'm trying to create here is a nice boulevard look, both to complement the homes, and what you don't see here yet in the final design, we're gonna have a cool pedestrian crossway here, and we're working on, if you're familiar with Bridgewater and the bridge that goes from the clubhouse to T #1, Ms. Burton was concerned about moving people back and forth. So as we dig this pond and this pond, I'm gonna create an elevated buffer between the commercial and the homes here, and actually have a bridge over this so people can walk up and over and down.
But none of that is in this proposal.
Well, I'm not done yet. I mean, the only thing we're doing tonight is adding that property and making a change to the park. I said I'm gonna be back later this fall. I mean, I have 2 engineering firms and 3 architects working on all this now.
Birch, you're asking for 3 things tonight, not 2.
What's that?
You're asking for the addition of land, which I don't have a problem with. I think that's a good thing. You're asking to modify the park. I'm not sure I'm okay without having some kind of facility for kids. And then you're asking to remove the central fountain and gathering place and put in something else, which you tell me is going to have seating and all kinds of things, but you don't show me that. So,
Well, and I guess what we're talking about, there's no gathering place here. That's a fountain and 2 roads. 2 roads and a fountain. Nothing's changing other than the shape of
can
a
you show
fountain.
me, Pam, I think there was a picture of the fountain in the first original PUD.
Yeah, it was in the character exhibits.
Yeah, it wasn't, you know, we knew it wasn't going to be a massive thing, but you did talk about gathering places and people could sit there and have their lunch and things like that, and that's not what, that's,
I
and
mean-
you know what, how I feel, so I'll let
I
somebody
understand.
else talk.
So could I get clarification? Because Dr. Keller, you brought up, and I was kind of struggling with this too, 3 changes: the additional property, the trailhead changes, and then this other, the centerpiece fountain part. But that's not listed as part of the narrative, and I was going through trying to compare language. That third piece clearly is changing, but is this envisioning what you consider to be compliant, or are you asking for a change on that? And maybe that's a
No,
staff
I
question.
think
if
it's
that's a change.
compliant. I agreed to put in a water feature. And if you look at the uses here, you're gonna have plenty of gathering spaces. We have an indoor facility here which has outside pickleball plus an outside courtyard. I mean, this is geared up for people to be here. And you know, and as far as parking, I think the last count, I was close to 1,000 spaces. I mean, and that doesn't even count a church that doesn't use their spaces but on Wednesday night and Sunday. I mean, on this side, if we extended it down farther, we could have as many as 600.
Pam, help me out here. I believe that the original concept plan showed this central water feature, and that this is a change.
Yeah, it's
and
right
it was
there.
in consistent compliance with that. So this new one is not in compliance. That's why staff suggested they ask for.
Correct. That's listed in the staff report, the bottom of page 2. States that the proposed PUD amendment requires the water feature to be developed in substantial compliance with the character exhibit as shown in Exhibit 8. And that Exhibit 8 would replace the character exhibit of the water feature in the original PUD ordinance.
And to me, I share Dr. Kelleher's concern that it loses a lot of the character that we thought it was going to be as it's been developed in the current design. And though it wasn't listed in the narrative as one of the changes, it is a big change going to this. And I have concerns over that I don't have with the other 2 items, actually.
I share the concern on the fountain. When this came in, I think, Birch, you had a real vision for this being amenity for Grand Park, that this mixed-use area would, I mean, I heard Clay Terrace mentioned, and we know a lot of the families of those that are visiting Grand Park or going there to Dick's and different things. And this was an area right at the back door of Grand Park for that. And so when we talked about that fountain, it was kind of the centerpiece of a shopping and outdoor cafes and restaurants and maybe some other activities that these families could come over and do. And while I think the center water feature would be very pretty, it's just a pretty thing in the road. It's not this centerpiece of when we talked about Gatlinburg or the Florida parks that have the big fountain and everybody's gathering. And so I think that's really the deviation tonight that I'm struggling with, because I'm not sure what this area is now, which I thought was supposed to be really a supporting arm to Grand Park. And then we have that concept plan. It says in substantial compliance, but part of the attractiveness for me on that was having those angled buildings, and it just felt like a centerpiece area to your PUD. And now I feel like we're seeing a lot of asphalt, and if I recall Andre's comments the first time, I think he used like an asphalt jungle. He didn't want to see that off of 191st Street with the people coming into Grand Park, and all they see is pavement. And I know the buildings are there, but there's just a lot of asphalt now that I felt like you had really divided up well in the original concept plan. So this change, all these changes are, in my opinion, very different. And I also noticed that there's a 10,000 square foot building event center that's been added on this plan versus the last one. And I'm not saying that's not appropriate or that I don't like it, but it is a change from the original concept plan. When something's substantially compliant, you add a building. There's just a lot of changes here among the buildings. And then the park, if Pam, can you pull up the image of the park on the original PUD, please?
Exhibit E.
So this play area and the exercise equipment is what's in the original PUD for that area, which is beautiful. And then these different, it looks like there's an archway with some local art, and this building over to the left, which it sounds like you're going to do with some restrooms, which I think is a great idea. But the feel of that top picture versus now just having some grassy areas, and maybe those, it's probably hard for everybody to see, but those are exercise machines in the front. That's very different than what's being proposed now. All that playground equipment and feeling very active, feeling like it was a place for not only our own residents, but the visitors at Grand Park going over to kind of gather and have fun there. And now that's being taken out as well, is my understanding. So I just feel like we have a lot of changes. I have no problem with you adding the land. As Dr. Kelleher said, I think that's fine, but this just seems to be very different tonight.
Well, let me clarify the park. I have no say over that. I'm not the owner of that 5 acres. The Woods family is. When we purchased the ground, they kept control of that. Now, I'm obligated to pay for it. So, you know, obviously I have a vested interest in it. So, again, I think staff, the Woods family needs to communicate and discuss your concerns on the park. But I would suggest to you, if you go back to concept plans, you know, here's the problem when you look at a concept plan before you get into it. Reality hits, you know, right now, I mean, do any of you remember how many square feet we got approved in here? I don't think you do. We have 500,000 square feet, which reality is not going to happen. I can't build all those buildings. All right, so the difference between that and that right there, you know, I can knock that edge off and turn that easy, if that's what we need there. But again, before we even get into these mixed-use properties, which is 200 Airbnb and first floor retail, I'm gonna come back and redesign this to make it more of a play area and so forth. Right now, I'm focused on this. Getting this done. This church, if you look at it, had a huge reception hall. So the only difference is we have a smaller chapel and the reception hall there. I don't view that as a big change. I mean, this is called refinement of a plan. And, you know, as you get into the weeds and start laying out the dirt, you know, I have less commercial land now than I thought I was gonna have because the roads are eating up more and the right-of-ways for the utilities. So, you know, as far as the asphalt, I mean, if you look here, nothing's really changed there. I mean, that looks dead the same. Here, I took that building out to alleviate some of the square foot, so you got a little asphalt there, but I've stayed true to it. Even more so, I'm allowed to have 3 rows of parking out front. I'm trying to stay away from it. This is where the action's gonna be when people come out and they see, oh, what's going on here? Outdoor bar, outdoor pickleball, stuff like that. So I think the changes we're making, which are really refinements, I mean, I haven't changed the spirit of anything here, other than I took a non-functional fountain that an engineer's told me is, you know, it's not worth the money to build, and I'm trying to create a cool boulevard. And I think I can give you better examples of it with the ones I provided you today, Weston. When you look at this and look down, and then you're gonna see something very dramatic, and people will congregate along this boulevard. Go back to the roundabout. But here's what reality is. You know, when I get this kind of drawing that says, hey, we're gonna bump up, take this land, look what it already did to my plan. They're taking more of it, and they only planned a single road here. A single road going into a Clay Terrace type situation doesn't work. So we're gonna have to modify this, and we're eating up more land. More land means less buildings and different configurations. I mean, it's just geometries. So I respect your views of it, but again, I'm telling you, I'm just refining something that was a start here into something better. And as far as this being split into 2 buildings, it's just, you know, this part of the ground's on lease ground, this part is not. This is purchase ground. So, I mean, it's just economic reality setting in. So I'm happy, you know, to work with staff on this, but I mean, you're talking over $100 million worth of stuff here. We've already spent $15 million getting to where we're at. I mean, this is no silly little, okay, I'm gonna do it. I mean, I'm into this pretty deep.
Birch, I have a question.
Mhm.
The Woods family gave you permission, gave staff permission initially to ask for this rezone. They saw these plans. I mean, they gave you permission to come in and ask for a rezone.
Absolutely.
And
That's their
now
engineer.
they've changed their mind on what they want on this piece of land for a park? Because originally, they gave permission for you to bring that plan to us.
Correct, I understand. I mean, people change their mind.
Well,
I mean,
it's part of a total development that we approved, and I'm not sure you can change parts of it without affecting the rest of it. And it doesn't have to be a fountain. It can be a thing like you showed where there are tiers of water, but it is a circular central gathering place, so.
I think the refinement we should all expect is going to occur as the design progresses, of course. You've explained that well, Birch, but what we're looking at, not this one, but the newer version, looks like it went through refinement and value engineering at key places that made enough of a character difference that it doesn't look like what it did before. And those were important to us. And it's not so much quantity of parking, you mentioned the quantity and things like that. On the plan on the left, the new one, between the mixed-use buildings, it's building, parking, building. Whereas the older version on the right, it was more of a, I don't know if this is the right landscape architecture term, but it was more of a promenade. I mean, that was more of a pedestrian-friendly, that was more of a, there'd be some shaded areas. It was different functionally, and I think we're losing a lot of that character with the version that is why I'm feeling like this is more than a refinement.
Can we go back to the tab on the left, the second one from the right where it shows the fountains? Yeah. When we had our preliminary meeting to kind of set the agenda, talk over some of these things, we looked at that. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I misinterpreted how this was to be seen on site. It looked like the bottom diagram would have been something that if you were coming up the drive and cut a cross-section through, you'd have one drive line on the right, another one on the left, and
Yeah, 2 lanes
this would be
both
going down the
directions.
middle in section view. But really, in looking at these, what the section view is north to south.
Correct.
So
So
that
this
you
would
have
be the
this
back of the
pool-
property going to the front.
Yeah, this big pool is towards 191st Street, and the higher elevation where it all starts to trickle down is towards the north. It's a fairly flat site. And looking at the contour map, the residence that is at the far north end of the property where the driveway comes up from Grand Park Boulevard is at 925. Pretty much the rest of the site seems to be 920, so there's 5 feet of difference there. I'm just wondering, how are you going to make all of this happen if in fact that's the kind of a fountain
So
feature
let's
that
call
prevails
this,
here?
let's take this baseline here, call that 920, okay? So this would be built up, okay? So you're gonna have a unique look on both sides of this fountain along the side. And so as the water spools down, and it may not be as dramatic as this, you know, what I'm looking for is if you looked up there from Grand Park, I like sometimes for them to see a wave, like a blue light coming down to pop it up. Other times for Christmas time, red, green coming down. And we'll share some other exhibits with you from another engineer in St. Louis, but that'll answer your question. But I have to create that fall, but it's not that dramatic. Because you remember, you're gonna turn around, and pump that back up there and drop it again.
Right, and that's kind of part of my concern is that left to right, since that's now going north-south, that's several hundred feet. So how are we gonna really get distinction of all of these levels as they come down, or are we gonna go down and then maybe back up? Are we gonna have a little dancing water kind of thing?
No,
You know,
I think it's gonna be
It's
a
a long
nice-
distance to just think about water trickling down.
Call it a bubbling brook if you want, but, with some light action in it. But I think, Weston, if you could circulate the ones I had today, did I send them to you? Well, just shoot them to them, and they can see it between now and the next time. I've had other fountain people involved out of St. Louis that created something down at Cincinnati at the American Stadium, which is a waterfall. So it's about 30 feet wide, and it's about 270 feet long. And it takes it down a trail, so. But, I hear you, so I think we'll just have to keep discussing it.
Okay, I'm open to looking at
Yeah.
what you can provide. The other thing that wasn't clear that I think I gathered from your explanations on the site plan where the church has changed size and now the plan shows a 10,000 square foot building/event center. You're saying that is actually part of the overall church development, that instead of having their own facility under one roof where you just go through doors, they would be able to use this facility in some other manner, completely independent, but it'll be available for whatever the purposes of the congregation would be.
Now, let me explain it again. So this section right here is lease ground. It's a long-term ground lease, similar to a farm.
Yeah.
This has been purchased, okay? So we be simple. So here, this is lease. So adding this purchase ground, I can't split property lines with the building, right? Okay? So the wedding chapel, which will be a wedding chapel on Friday and Saturday nights, like we've always planned, and a church on Wednesday and Sunday. This is a tax-paying church. Right? This is not a not-for-profit. This is a privately owned church property that's being leased to a church, okay? This, on Sunday, will be the Life Center, similar to what I built at Castleview Baptist, a big family life center. Well, on Friday, Saturday night, that's a for-profit, tax-paying reception hall. And it's not gonna be a Ritz Charles, it's gonna be very nice, but it's gonna be made for the middle class of America. You know, reasonable church weddings and reasonable receptions. So the vision is that on the Girth property, is that as the takes happen on 191st Street, you know, right now I'm showing that cut to stay there, but if I could use this cut to access that, you know, it'd be nice to own it all eventually, you know, develop it all commercially and get those road cuts out of there. But this is just the first one that came available.
All right, a little more definition on how those will actually function and.
Yeah, but I mean, if our goal is to develop commercial, I mean, we gotta develop commercial. I mean, there's no reason to zone it and not build something on it, right?
That's how you make money. Other comments from any commission members?
Birch, just one quick question. I mean, this, I assume you're wanting to replace the substantial compliance concept with this new one, if it's approved. And I'm just wondering, as I'm looking at the road coming in, if we turn in off that roundabout going north, if you wanted to go over to the sports tech, and I know I'm getting a little technical here, but I don't understand how, because the fountain's running down that median, how do you get over to that sports tech parking lot?
Well, here you'll have a crossway, and you guys are getting a little hung up on, this is really a space holder for the amount of land that's gonna be used for that fountain going down the middle. You know, we may have a walkway underneath it, a bridge over it, you know, whatever the final design becomes, there's gonna be cool ways of doing it. But again, that's why I felt as a good break between the residential and the commercial, and that's why these buildings here may move down by the time we have the final concept, is that I wanna create a buffer, because if I'm living here, even though that's the back side of the house, you know, I don't wanna stare to the, you know, into the back of a building. So I'm trying to create something really cool right here. And that's why I thought of that Bridgewater bridge going over the top. So if you're over here, you can walk up, over, and back down. Kind of give them 3 different ways to get over there. I mean, I want them to go to both places. I mean, these are gonna be commercial restaurants, bars, and so forth. So we want the migration of people back and forth. You know?
I'm just talking about when you pull in off 191st Street. So I see what looks to be a right in going over to the pickleball center, but I'm just not sure how you get to the sports tech
I agree.
side.
It's not clear right here. And that
Okay.
goes back to your comment, Andre. You know, staff wanted to discuss this fountain a little more. Be honest with you, I'm really in here just for this and that park. You're gonna see a more refined plan here in the fall. I mean, I got 3 different architects, 2 different engineering firms, trying to figure out how to put, you know, this stuff in to make it work. So, I mean, I'm gonna be back in with Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, no different than Chatham.
That
before I
sounds
build.
like we should keep this to the 2 items that you had in your narrative and not swap out an exhibit then. That takes us down the path that clearly we've expressed some concerns, and you've just basically told us we have to have further development on anyway. So that might be an approach that you might want to consider. Separate this item out, I don't know.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've updated the fountain just kind of as a discussion point and so forth. And that brings up something I was gonna mention when you guys talk about not communicating with each other or with petitioners. Actually, I get a lot of my ideas from your people's comments, whether it's directly or through APC. So I would encourage you guys to keep talking amongst yourself. I mean, you know, building walls is the worst thing we can do in the world right now. We need more communication, but, so, I mean, the point is that I want to bring the Girth property in so I can buy it from her, and then in the park. And what I suggest we do in the park is that your comment go back through staff with, you know, the Woods family, and it sounds like to me, you know, you want the play area in there. I'm not opposed. I mean, you know, so I think that's an easy discussion to have with them.
Going forward, how much of this are you looking for approval for quickly? Or is this something that will all have a similar lengthy, potentially gestation period? Because the fountain sounds like it's gonna take a while to resolve. You've alluded to the fall.
I want to, I'm sure that Miss Girth wants her money. I'm not obligated to close until I get that zone in the park. The way it works is that when we put in road cut 1 and road cut 2, this park's got to go in at the same time, because when you do your earth moving, we're going to dig that pond and dig that pond. So the beauty of this engineer that the Woods family hired is that she's pretty smart. She's not changing the surface topo at all. I mean, very limited grading. You know, all the money's being spent on, you know, the amenities and the plantings and the, you know, the shelter and the enclosed bathrooms. So, but, you know, I'd like to move on this part as quickly as I can, because I want to be able to turn this over to the architects.
And that's where I was heading, is do you want to revise this before you are in front of us again, to just take the fountain in the middle feature, whatever it is, that's maybe not a fountain any longer, a roundabout with great landscaping and some benches, contour the buildings to kind of mimic it. If those are 2-story buildings, maybe you save a really, really big bridge by having something to connect the two of them without side stairways on the building, so you can get back and forth the busy street without having to cross it at grade. Bring that as a separate entity later so that we can digest that individually and get you the approvals that you might be looking for on the land and the park more timely.
You know, the alternative to that is leave the concept plan the way it is, because like I said, I want to amend it later this fall and just add the land and make the adjustments to the park. Those two can get done.
And that's what I'm trying to
Yeah, I think that's,
highlight here, is let's focus on how to
works for
make that
me.
happen.
you know, I was encouraged to educate you on my ideas on the fountain, so that's why we're here today on that.
I think we've been
Educated.
reasonably well educated. We have expectations of something further that you'll bring to us sometime in a couple, 3 months perhaps, that will be much more refined, and we'll be able to see how it fits your concept plan without seeming like such a dramatic change perhaps.
Absolutely.
So we
Aye.
Pam, what is the procedural thing to do right now? Does he need to rewrite his PUD amendment? Because I don't think we can vote on a piece of it, can we?
He would need to amend the proposal before coming back.
Right.
For a vote. This was a public hearing only
Right,
tonight.
Right,
so.
okay. I just wanted to make sure Birch knew what he needs to get done before he comes back.
Well, wait, please don't walk away. I'm confused about the ownership. I mean, first the development, but then the ownership of this park. Can you explain that to me?
Well, it's always been that way from the original. The Woods family retained that 5 acres because they want to gift it, you know.
Gifted to who?
I don't know, whoever they're gifting it to. I'm not really privy to that. So they kept the 5 acres, and they've hired their own engineer after we closed, and they requested some changes to the park.
But who is going to maintain the park?
Well, I'm on the hook for that right now. So
Right,
assuming
you say
who,
I'm on the hook for that right now. I mean, as the master developer, that, I'm guessing that that would ultimately be who is responsible for the park development and maintenance,
I
correct?
am.
What happens when you step away from this project? What is, where does that go? I'm just trying to figure this all out, again, because I still
Well-
don't understand who's gonna actually be
When
paying
when
for
the
the
park
maintenance.
is given to whatever entity, they'll take over the responsibility for the maintenance.
whether that's the city or your
Whoever
development
they
company,
discuss it
the
with.
ownership entity that is set up for all of this, that's all yet TBD. Would it be helpful to get a comment from person who wants to gift the property. I think we maybe could, if you're going to speak, Mr. Wood, would you come up again, please, to the, see if you can help bring some clarity to this?
For one thing, the woods, it's been listed as woods. It's single. We're a tree, not a forest. Anyway, that's semantics. The portion of the family that owns this property is one of my sisters and her children. As far as the park, they are wishing to honor our parents. They are in discussion with both the city and the county to decide who wants to take it, who wants to utilize it, and be responsible for it. Now, I'm not privy to that conversation per se. I'm just sharing who they are dialoguing with.
All right, and Birch is involved because he is developing the rest of the site in conjunction with the improvements that the family has wanted, but apparently have either changed or weren't clearly communicated previously, because we were led to expect certain things that we're now not being told we should expect.
I don't know how, when, who decided to go from a playground to a conservation conservatory. I'm not involved with that. I wish I could tell you, but I don't know.
Okay.
So I share Cindy's curiosity about this. I mean, it's very unusual for us to hear stuff like this. As far as this ownership is a little strange, but other than just concerned citizen interested in it, as far as plan commission, I don't know that we can or should necessarily dig into that. Is that our purview really anyway?
Well, it's more just trying to understand how this all fits in, because again, there's not really amenities for all these residents either. And so it's all in this park. And so I'm just trying to understand, is this, you know, the common area for this neighborhood? You know, because there's a lot of people that are gonna be living and visiting here.
Yeah, the earlier discussion.
It's not, I thought it was more about that than a trailhead.
Yeah, the earlier
And
discussion.
because the city did not want this piece, because we already had a trailhead.
What
parcel.
goes into the park, I think, is aligned with what you're saying, and that makes sense. Not necessarily the ownership, even though that's a curiosity to us.
And I only asked Mr. Wood to see if he could help give us a little more clarity on how this might evolve. I'm not sure we can get anything more, so appreciate your input.
Thank you.
But I agree with you that that needs to shake out on its own. Apparently, staff and whatever family members need to help resolve what's going to be there before it gets back on our next agenda.
And I guess for me, Birch, and for staff, the people who own this land signed over for you to come in and do a PUD, and they approved of what you did. And now apparently they have changed their mind. And if they have, I guess I would like them to come in and explain why and how it will affect, because we looked at it, I looked at it as an amenity for this community, which had very little green space or anything else. And if they're just looking at it from, this is what we want, maybe they need to be before us, or we need to say, but this was a part of a bigger project. It had, you know, a purpose here. And if they still feel they have some reason to want to change it, but I guess I would like them to at least understand this wasn't a separate thing. This was part of an entire PUD to serve these people.
And certainly, I'm not trying to squash that conversation at all. It's more so that I look at, there's a petitioner, and Birch is the collaborator, coordinator, all the stakeholders involved in that behind the scene to us. And so there is a petition, and we talk about what does or doesn't go in there, and it may be of benefit for us to hear some reasoning if it affects our final decision in terms of what we do or don't approve to go in there. But we don't have two petitioners in this, there's one, and I'm just kind of trying to get us back to procedural, that's all.
And the
Right,
way
and
my mind is boiling this down is probably the family members that had this vision that came before us. They're not land professionals. I mean, they probably know a lot about their aspect of land ownership, but how it integrates into a PUD with all of the other components that are in this PUD, they didn't probably have a clarity of understanding of just how final something would be looked at by this governmental entity that we are. And if it needs to change, then PUDs are changing all the time. This is one of them. So this needs to come back in front of us, and we don't want to keep trying to, I don't think we need to want to spend any more time on it tonight. We understand what the issue is. Somebody needs to communicate that, figure it all out before this is on our next agenda, so that we can hopefully do this just with those two items and then the fountain later, or maybe it takes bringing just back the new property addition, then the park, then the other things. You have to figure out how many times you want to appear in front of us.
I love being here. This is fun.
Yeah, you're a great company. Just don't wear that shirt with that A on it.
My
Get a
daughter's
block-
going to Alabama this fall.
Get a Blocko.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
All right, does anybody else have things they really want to bring up tonight? I think we've actually exhausted what we probably need to tonight. That being the case, we have one more public hearing in front of us. Probably won't take as long. It is petition 2207-PUD-15, Midtown at Westfield PUD Amendment 1. Who is presenting on behalf of staff? You
That
will
would be me. Yes, we're working on getting that pulled back up. It looks like the wrong window got closed for a second. Good evening, Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, we have an amendment to the Midtown at Westfield PUD, specifically for 10 acres of real estate located at approximately the northeast corner of US Highway 31 and 191st Street. The proposed amendment would modify the development standards specific to the real estate, primarily architecture, to accommodate a new ambulatory healthcare pavilion. This item has been properly noticed and advertised, and the department had received no comments prior to the posting of the agenda or end of day. We have, however, received 2 emails from one neighbor who I will forward, which I will forward to you at the beginning of the public hearing. We do have Matt Skelton with Churchill and Antrim here to present this evening, after which both he and I will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Skelton.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For the record, Matt Skelton with Churchill and Antrim, with offices at 116 North Union Street here in town. With me this evening from the Alderson Development Group is Tony Alderson, the owner. Also with us this evening is Brad Henke with Henke Development Team. The Alderson Development Group is excited to share with you its plans for a state-of-the-art comprehensive medical campus for Community Health Network to be located within the Midtown at Westfield PUD. The item before you is approximately 10 acres of the existing PUD. It's not on the hard corner of 191st and 31. It's just a little bit north of 191st Street. Excuse me. The proposal includes Class A office, medical office space, which is a permitted use today, so there's no alteration being requested for that. The campus will include primary care, behavioral health, women's health, integrative medicine, physical therapy, imaging services, among other possible uses. The PUD is proposed to address really just a few things that are not consistent with the charge that the architect was given here. The charge community gave to their architect was to design a landmark, state-of-the-art facility. Alderson Group has built several facilities for community health, and this is the largest. One of the requirements of the PUD ordinance, can I borrow that? I'll span through, you have these in your materials, but just for the audience, this is the campus that has been designed, and these are actual elevations of Building 1, which will be the northernmost building. But one of the items in the PUD that is before you this evening, this building here, well, this entire PUD area is required to be a 4-story. There's a minimum 4-story requirement. This is the largest of the buildings. It's approximately 100,000 square feet, give or take, in size. Most of that building is 4 stories. There's a portion of it, if you look at the elevations, that is 3 stories, and the stair stepping actually provides a little bit of architectural relief, I think, and it enhances the look of the building. This area here in Lot 1 is contemplated as being at least 2 stories. It could be taller, but at least 2 stories, and it'll be connected by a covered pedestrian way. The other item that is addressed in the PUD proposal before you, the building materials that are contemplated in the Midtown PUD, not disparaging them at all, but they didn't have a state-of-the-art medical campus in mind when they were built. We do not plan to use fiberboard or hardy plank or EIFS or stucco is the other thing that it contemplates, and we're not planning to use any of those materials. Those are not requirements of the PUD, but they're certainly one of the materials that are permitted. The architecture of these buildings will consist of, I'm going to say vision glass, and my first question was, is there any other kind? And I think there is. There's glass that you can't see through. But vision glass, raised architectural metal panels, and masonry. And so those 3 elements will make up all of the building exteriors. The PUD proposal also requests a delegation of the parking requirements to the director for determination at a later time. Right now, that's not uncommon for an integrated campus like this. We build these enough that we are able to demonstrate from several other facilities what the parking needs are for this use. And also, this building is not finally designed yet, and so those parking requirements are going to be dictated by that design as well. We've also included a signage package that is designed specifically for this location. The architect was charged with placing and orienting signs on facades to break up unbroken planes and to provide architectural relief. And that's in fact what they have done. This is kind of a small scale, but you can probably see it better in front of you. So that package has been included to scale in your PUD ordinance. And one thing that the staff did not point out that we will plan to address between now and when you'll see us again is to have equivalent standards that would be applicable to building number 2. And then the last item is lighting. The PUD ordinance has some unique lighting requirements, and we've worked closely with the Hinkie project team. We wouldn't be before you tonight if we hadn't already been before them and obtained their approval for our architecture, our site design, and our other elements here. But in the green area here identified, the concept is to include this more classical-looking light standards for the street, the main entry area. And then within the campus itself, in maintaining the same contemporary architectural style, we intend to use these light standards. They go a long way to control light spillage. They're energy efficient, and instead of lighting up the sky, you just light up what you're what you're orienting them towards. These are not dissimilar from several of the modern fixtures that the city uses in its facilities. So with that, I'll just close by saying that Alderson is very excited about this project to do this in Westfield. We think it'll be a huge addition to Midtown, and they would like to get moving as quickly as possible on this project, as early as this year if we can get through all the necessary approvals. And we'd look forward to responding to any of your questions or comments if we can here this evening before or after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. It is 8:56 PM. I'll open a public hearing. Do we have any cards?
No, we have no one who's signed up at this time, but anyone who'd like to speak can come up to the podium and speak. And then we do have it's 2 emails in the same email chain from one neighbor, so I'll forward it as one chain, just make sure you see both. The second was just a correction from the first, so I
right.
have those forwarded to you right now.
While you're sending that and we get an opportunity to glance at it, final reminder for anybody that might be attending virtually, if there are other comments from somebody not in the room, planners@westfield.in.gov is the email address. This is Midtown@Westfield PUD. Type quickly. I'll close the public hearing at 8:58 if we don't have anything further.
Pam, did you send this to the petitioner also?
I did.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Because I might ask them to respond to some of these.
It is now 8:58 in the absence of any additional emails. I will close the public hearing. So, have you had a chance to look at the emails that were forwarded already to respond?
I did not commit them to memory. If there's something you'd like me to respond to.
Well, Pam just forwarded a couple of comments that were received by email as officially part of the public hearing. If you haven't
I haven't
looked at them
seen-
yet,
I haven't
that's
seen them
fine.
since I've been here now.
Commissioner comments, then we'll move on to those. Questions or
I'll go ahead and
comments
jump
from
in.
Plan
Only
Commissioner?
one comment, Matt. You show the light, the decorative light, and unfortunately, I couldn't rig up Duke Energy's light because it said my browser needs to be updated here. But a lot of those types of lights, the bulb comes out of the bottom. And so the only thing that is shielded really is the top, and the bulb sits there and it shines out the side. We've had a lot of complaints from neighborhoods who've had those. I don't know if this one does, I couldn't bring it up. But there are lights by Duke and others that look like that, where the light is actually in the top. It's LEDs in the top that shine down. So if you could please make sure that whatever you use would do that. Without that, neighbors and even other people, it's like a lamp without a lampshade. Yeah. So, thank you.
We'll talk with the Hinkie team too, because I think
Yeah, I'm sure they're as sensitive to this as.
well, they're going to
everybody else.
adopt a similar strategy, I think, for other lighting within the development. So
Right,
we'll,
because what happens with those is they may shine down, but if a driver looks up, they're immediately blinded because the light comes out. He's shaking his head, he understands. Thank you. Thank you.
Other commission comments?
So at the first pass through this petition, and then again, listening this evening and flipping through the exhibits again, I think the adaptation of the building materials, the adjustments that are being requested make a lot of sense for this use. Of course, we put those in place to establish a certain quality level, and this is not, as far as I can see in any way, decreasing that quality level. It's just adjusting to suit the architecture as it should for this commercial use. I think it's appropriate for the views where it's going to be. I'll dig in deeper to make sure, while I think your intent is very good here, I'll make sure that, you know, there's no wording that opens us up, but I don't think there is right now. It looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was not the intention to cheapen. If anything, it's a higher level than what would otherwise be permitted.
And I was going to jump in and say that I appreciate you wanting to elevate this project. So just my one point there. My second point is just thank you for wanting to bring this to our community. As we continue to grow, you know, we don't just serve Westfield, even though, again, we are growing. We serve northern Hamilton County and further than that. So this is going to be a great regional development that will be heavily utilized for years to come. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll communicate that to the community team, too.
Cindy?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sometimes when we do things and just say, it's got to be in substantial compliance with this exhibit,
Mhm.
right? And we think we know what we're getting. When it comes down to the actual standard, we're not quite sure what we're getting. And signage would be one of these cases right now. I'm kind of confused because you're just asking for it to be in compliance with what you're showing. And I don't know how that meets our standard or doesn't.
Oh, I'm sure it does not. That was never an intention.
And I guess the important thing, and it goes back to equity, and I've had this problem in the past, I don't want to go and approve a certain level of signage and then have that be unfair to others in a competitive realm. And so when I don't even know exactly what I'm approving, it kind of gives me pause, and I don't want to be unfair in the future. You know, their competitor comes across the street, I want to know what we gave you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's just a side note there, but.
That's a fair comment. I think with it's the whole Riverview exercise. I mean, they face the same thing. When you're trying to mass a sign on the city's standards do not scale well to a building of this size. And that's why Riverview signs were so much larger than what was normally permitted. But we can do some analytics just so you know where we are.
We also have had issues with lights actually shining into neighbors, you know, realms too, though, with a lot of these projects. So, I mean, I want to make sure that we're not creating an issue there for the neighbors. And this is going to have a residential component, if I'm not mistaken, to this project as well. I know the majority of the lights weren't to be oriented that way, but
sure.
Again, I don't often know what's going to happen in that. And again, I'm a little bit, and this is on a broader scale, right? This is coming in and it's amending one very specific parcel of this bigger PUD. We're not changing the rest of the PUD, but we're changing this one. And this one does not at all fit the character that was established in the rest of the PUD. So it's kind of a tricky place for us to be right now, because in one way you're saying, yes, this is appropriate, but you're not changing anything else for the rest of the PUD. So it gives me an imbalance.
Sure. Oh, and I don't want to put words in the Hinkie team's mouth, but in working with them, I mean, the whole idea is to try to transition. I don't think they could have dreamed up, you tell me if I'm wrong, a 10-acre medical campus that would want to locate here. I mean, that 2019 was...
Well, they did have big office and hotel uses and things,
yeah,
too.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like they had small buildings here. I mean...
Yeah, it wasn't really, it didn't have a campus in mind. And so this is just, it's just a little bit different. And if you want to, you know, a medical campus, I mean, this is a architectural vision for this medical campus. And in working with the Hinkie team, we've been working to transition from kind of like it's like a more of a Williamsburg kind of style into the contemporary 31 corridor architecture of this facility. And that's been our exercise, and this is where we've landed with that. So I understand your comment, I do, but I think that, you know, community has definite preferences about how they would like this building to look and feel.
Can someone give me a better example of these architectural panels that you're talking about? Or maybe could you bring in something just to show me?
We can help.
Because you're talking up to 80% of these facades is what the language says, can be these panels.
I mean, that's just the box that we're building, but I mean, arguably, 2 of the elevations comply with the underlying standards without any changes. It's just, we're also trying to set standards that we know that building number 2 can easily comply with. And it's going to be an architectural, you know, it's an architectural exercise. It's not intended to try to diminish or minimize any applicable standards. If we actually built in compliance with the standards that apply now, you would probably like it less.
Well, again, I just don't know about,
I understand.
when you're saying 80% of these panels, that I'm not 100% familiar with what you're going to be using. So.
We can provide you with more information on that.
It's not 80% of the entire building, it's 80% of the building that isn't glass.
Exactly, yeah. So, and there's a lot of glass on this building. One of the, I've spent a lot of time.
Visual glass.
Huh? Yeah, visual glass, vision glass.
Vision glass.
But I've spent a lot of time, and you will now too, as you drive up and down the 31 corridor, looking at the different architectural styles and visions of the various buildings up and down. And there's everything from granite panels to all glass buildings. I mean, probably the fanciest building that's been built in Carmel in the 31 corridor and in some time is the new car corporate headquarters, and I think it's like probably 90% glass. And so, you know, I mean, if you want a headquarter type place, I mean, that's part of attracting them. So I'll stop talking. Thank
It's
you.
not going to change color like Eskenazi's glasses. Depending on where the light hits it, it changes color.
I will ask that question.
I'm just kidding. It's pretty cool.
Matt?
Yes.
Would it be possible to supply an architectural drawing of only building 1? Right now, I mean, you've got building 1 and building 2, but we're not sure, building 2 might not be built for a period of time. What will building 1 look like?
So it's in your material.
Is it?
Yep, this is building 1. This is without a sign. Let me look here. I think, is this, what am I, here, can you put back?
Because I didn't see just the one
Give
building.
it to him.
Where, is it here? Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this is in your materials, Mr. Johns, but these are elevations for building 1, actual 2-scale elevations for building 1, and this just shows building 2, the likely configuration of building 2 ghosted out. So if that helps, if you want more than that or something different, we're happy to supply it.
That does help.
Anything further? Building 2's the cooler one, so if you could build that quicker, would really appreciate that. More for staff. Years ago, APC used to approve signs. I've probably approved more signs than everybody in this room, including staff through all my years when I did shopping center stuff. I approved every sign that went in with the tenants I dealt with. So I'm always a little bit sensitive to them. I'm always so disappointed when we see something like we used to, and then what shows up on the building is maybe the same sign, but it gets on a raceway or some other way of installing it, which just diminishes the impact of it. So I'm hoping that we get something really clear out of this. If this is something that we're in effect actually getting back in slightly to the sign approval territory, anything you want to tell us about or caution us about or warn us about here? What are we actually doing to you or for you?
I would definitely want to check with legal to see if we're okay with this, because if we're approving the signs as shown in there, we're regulating the content of the sign, which we can't do. Generally, we can regulate size, location, materials, manner, things like that. And I think in the past, we've included, I'm not sure if it was a PUD or maybe a variance I'm remembering, where we said substantial compliance with the size and location shown in the character exhibit, not the content. Like, we shouldn't be approving that exact sign shown on the wall. But we can say they have to be reverse channel or internally lit or whatever you think that way. We can regulate the size, we can have them show dimensions on there and say, the signs can be these dimensions and at this location, but actually saying these are the signs that are going to be there, then if their logo changes in 10 years, they have to come back.
And kind of delving further into that same thought process, the Cool building in Phase 2 has a solid wall with a partial graphic image of the
It is.
community logo. That would typically be viewed, well, it's actually not on that one.
No, it
I see
is.
it here.
Yeah.
There it is. Do you view that as signs as well? It is the corporate logo.
Yeah, that's a question that's come up frequently, but typically, yes, if it is a logo or business name, we would include it as a sign.
I like it, but I don't really get the same vote that I used to when we were first doing this, Ginny and I, and I'm not sure anybody else in this room that ever approved a sign before it became staff's job. But
I hate signs. I mean, I hate to look at them and determine if they're too big or too small. I just think they should be representative of what's next to them and what's in the area, but.
unlike
See,
you,
I just think,
like
I
doing
just
that
think they should look good. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think.
I
it
know,
should
and I
look-
know what that is.
And not be so lit that it blares out to the neighbors and the people on the street.
All right, so we need further guidance on exactly what this means when this comes before us again. So,
And
Matt?
I read you loud and clear. We can give more detail on that.
Matt, the questions that came from the email was something about the architecture, but it also talks about traffic and pedestrian trails. It's unclear to me in concepts how traffic will be managed, which is not a problem. They'll figure that out at Public Works. And then plans for pedestrian trails were presented in the 19 Midtown Concepts. Adjacent neighbors strongly desire pedestrian connectivity to the north, to the southern and western parts of Westfield. So just something for you to think about. I don't know if it has anything to do with this project, but those were her questions.
We'll talk with the Hinkie team and find out what their timeline. We don't front on East Street
Right,
or on 191st Street, but there will be opportunities for connectivity.
Right, that's what I
probably.
figured.
Yeah.
one other random sign thought that I had too, and I'm sure this is not meant to be what it looks like, is the pylon sign is like 4 stories tall and a mile wide. The way it's graphically shown in these renderings, incredibly massive. All right, any other commission comments for
May I ask a
Kristen, please?
Matt, I may have missed this, but these concepts, are you doing those in substantial compliance?
Yes.
Is that language in there? I'm just missing it, I guess.
So, yes, here, let me find it.
Because I guess if it's in there, great. The 80% aluminum siding, and we're not sure what that is. I could see that being done a lot of different ways. So if this is what you're doing and we get some compliance on that, that'd be fabulous. And then I heard what you said about the parking, but I also know that most people, wow, that's just really, let me yell. Okay. There aren't a lot of compact cars anymore, and I actually looked it up. I think it was like 8% of all cars sold last year were compact cars. So 20% of the spots, I know that's kind of a staff question as well. You may not do the full 20%, but I guess
Well, and I think, yeah, community probably doesn't, has more of an interest in making sure they have the right kind of parking spaces for their clients as anybody else. So, yeah, I doubt if that'll be a problem.
Okay. I just want to mention that making these parking spots smaller, I think we almost
Sure.
need to be making them bigger. And I get it, it's land and you want people, you need to park a lot of people. But, so anyway, that's just a comment. And then I think one of the comments that came in too was about ambulances coming in. Can you touch on that? is that something that's happening, or the noise from the ambulances was a question from?
So let me get back to
community.
you on that one, because
Okay, that's fine.
I don't know the answer.
Okay. I guess how that's being treated and how it might impact the neighbors, since that could be pretty loud. So
Sure.
that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You can get back with me. That's great. That's everything I had. Thank you.
And just, I did look at it. We have just amended the language of the existing PUD. Same language, not altering it, just incorporating new exhibits. So the existing PUD just had character imagery, and we're just want to make it clear, we believe that the images that we have put forth are actually consistent with the existing character imagery, but to the extent that there's any doubt, we don't have to, since we're going through this process anyway, we know what it's going to look like, so we just added our own.
Okay.
That was the thinking.
Is that at the director's discretion? Is the wording, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at it, at the director's discretion, or were those
By
concepts?
By default, it probably is.
Okay.
Yep. That's the way the PUD's drafted today.
Okay.
Term ambulance just brought up a random thought. Is there any reason that we could have any small chance of anticipating a helicopter needing to get in or out of here? We were caught very late in the game on Riverview saying, oh, by the way, we need a helipad.
And I haven't been a party to those conversations, and in all fairness, there's a lot of, one of our key team members is at Boy Scout camp this week, so let me confer with him and we'll get a response to you.
Getting
Okay?
scout help. That's very commendable. Merit badges?
Especially on a day like this.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah,
We- I'll bet it is warm. Well, this wouldn't probably be nearly the issue because it's not shoehorned into the 32
Yeah, the problem with-
interchange. And there are some nice big roof sections that perhaps could become that if it
Yeah.
needed to have something, but kind of bear that in mind that
Yeah.
we,
The problem with the
Don't wanna hear
Riverview
that at
one
the
is they
11th
needed to
hour.
get rid of all their landscaping in front of the building to put the helipad in, instead of,
And
you've got plenty of room here to do that, I'm sure.
And it's just not very common. They don't fly people in, they would only fly people out, and it's very, very few, very seldom.
okay. Any other commission comments? We'll see you back at a future meeting.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay. All other agenda items are continued to a future meeting. We are down to the point of Plan Commission comments. Do any Plan Commissioners have things to bring up for the good of the order here? If there aren't any of those, then we'll look to Kristen Berkman for a downtown update.
You know, Pam, one thing really quick that I noticed in the rules and procedures for the APC was it was listed, the downtown update was in there. Do you guys really, I mean, this is kind of a temporary thing. I don't know that it's a permanent update. Should we take that out of that agenda section?
We can, and
I
just
had that-
leave it as a sub-option under.
I had that same thought.
Yeah,
It's like, wow,
okay,
you're gonna-
sorry, that was a sidebar.
You're gonna
I
never
forgot earlier,
stop
but-
We can do that.
reporting on downtown, and you're gonna have trouble coming up with material in the future, but,
I hope it ends at some point. So,
anyway.
where we are right now, though, is an exciting phase of the project. We are hiring a partner to help us with the plans for State Road 32. And so we have two firms that have submitted proposals, MKSK and REA, who are both outstanding landscape architects. And so they have given us a portfolio of their work and a proposal of how they would work with NDOT. We're currently, the streetscape team is currently going through those proposals. We're using a rating sheet format to rate the two firms, and then we will be choosing a partner and moving forward very quickly to start doing the technical drawings that need to be turned over to NDOT, as well as specifying all the fun things, the lights and the benches and landscaping. So that's where we are right now.
Just kind of a quick refresher question. When is your guys' portion due to NDOT? Because I know that got pushed back a little bit. So what's kind of just the timetable?
That's a good question. Right now, December, I believe, is the latest date where everything must be turned over to NDOT for this particular portion, the streetscape.
We're certainly not waiting until then, though. That's not my expectation anyway, hopefully.
Sorry, I'll go back on the microphone, but when we see those detailed development drawings here, that has to be done basically for every section of the road from East Street to Westfield Boulevard. So it's a lot of drawings.
Thank you. City Council Liaison?
Council met June 27th. We had a presentation from Joanne Tedesco on the Disabilities Initiative and the new Mayor's Council on Disabilities. Marla Ayler, now working on special projects in the Clerk Treasurer's Office, presented information and concerns about drainage assessments and payments, as well as the city's property management agreement with DWNA. And stop me if anyone has questions. The ordinance creating a local historic preservation commission was tabled due to questions and concerns raised by some councilors. The ordinance to adopt the second-class city status failed, so we will stay a third-class city for now. The ordinance updating the city's traffic ordinance, that made no sense, was approved with an amendment. There was a provision in there to change Union Street speed limits and on the south end, and to decrease that, but it seems there wasn't a speed study to go along with it. So we did take that out. The other thing to note is 191st Street speed will be decreasing. And the county had done 2 different studies on that one and finally brought it down to 45. So we kind of share different parts of the right-of-way with them. So to make it even, we're doing just 45 the whole way.
Sorry, real quick, is that on the east side?
East
of town?
side,
Okay.
yes. And then there was an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the economic development lease rental bonds, and that was approved for the Union Street parking garage. So hopefully that will get started soon. New business, we had the introduction of additional appropriation of 2019 to 2020 GO bonds. That's pretty much standard fare. And ARPA, we had the ARPA committee forwarded a recommendation to the city council to basically provide funding assistance for 7 different nonprofits that had applied to the program. And so we did come up with a recommendation and spending $500,000 on that. It has not yet been approved by the council, but hopefully will be soon. That was it.
Okay, thank you. There was no BZA meeting in between our last meeting tonight, so no report there. We'll finish with whatever it is that community development might have for us.
Yes, we have a couple things. So first, regarding the rules, thank you all for your comments, and please try to get more comments into us on any suggested changes you have. We would anticipate having this back before you at the second July meeting. I will not be at that meeting, but Kevin will be back, and he'll be able to present all the changes that we've made at that time. Then, on a separate comment, we will be introducing a UDO amendment at the council meeting next week. This one is a single-item amendment related to common area landscaping and residential subdivisions. So we have created a bond requirement for common area landscaping. Right now, the only bonding the city requires is from the Public Works Department related to infrastructure and erosion control. And our landscaping standards state that they need to have landscaping in prior to 50% of the lots being built within each secondary plat section. So not the community as a whole, but each section, which may be 10 lots or maybe 100 lots, just depending on the community. So with this, if they're not compliant, we have a lot of back and forth and really not a lot of hold to get that done. With this new process, they would be submitting landscape bonds prior to their secondary plat being approved and recorded. And then once they have the planning installed, we would go in and inspect. And then once they're compliant, we would, return the bond, release the bond. If not, then eventually we could call in the bond if they're not reaching compliance. So it's That's the only thing that's in this UDO amendment, is just to facilitate that process. Caleb has done a lot of work on that, and he will be the one presenting this when, at your August meeting, so.
Very good, thank you. Nobody's got a thought that they forgot that they really need to bring up now. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Victor McCarthy and seconded by Jenny Kelleher. Staff call roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes?
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, 9:26 PM.